folks, welcome to the channel, Thinking Theology. I'm going to be changing that name pretty soon because when I came up with the name for the channel, it was really topics that involve theology or refutation of the various theological concepts. So it's a heavy dose of science. I'm agnostic. I'm right in the middle. I'm comfortable with the limits of what I know, what I think I can know, what mankind can know, and what we can't know. And so I'm comfortable right in the middle, and I listen to the various arguments and such. I just did a video on Brian Cox was on the Joe Rogan show, and Brian is a theoretical physicist, very humble man, eloquent speaker, and just pretty chill dude. And he was talking about whether or not science can prove or disprove God, and he went through it in his own way. And now Sabine Hossenfelder, who I've recently discovered, is covering a similar topic, but I think this is more along the lines of, was the universe made for us, for mankind? So we're going to see what she's got to say. She is a German theoretical physicist with a very large following. I think she's got like 1.6 million subscribers on her YouTube channel. So here we go.
Today I want to talk about the claim that our universe is especially made for humans or fine-tuned for life. According to this idea, it's extremely unlikely our universe would just happen to be the way it is by chance, and the fact that we nevertheless exist requires explanation. This argument is popular among some religious people who use it to claim that our universe needs a creator, and the same argument is used by physicists to pass off unscientific ideas like the multiverse or naturalness as science. In this video, I will explain what's wrong with this argument and why the observation that the universe is this way and not some other way is evidence neither for nor against God or the multiverse.
I love this stuff.
Here's how the argument goes in a nutshell. The currently known laws of nature contain constants. Some of these constants are, for example, the fine structure constant that sets the strength of the electromagnetic force, Planck's constant, Newton's constant, the cosmological constant, the mass of the Higgs boson, and so on. Now you can ask, what would a universe look like in which one or several of these constants were a tiny little bit different? Turns out that for some changes to these constants, processes that are essential for life as we know it could not happen, and we could not exist. For example, if the cosmological constant was too large, then galaxies would never form. If the electromagnetic force was too strong, nuclear fusion could not light up stars, and so on. There's a long list of calculations of this type, but they're not the relevant part of the argument, so I don't want to go through the whole list. The relevant part of the argument goes like this. It's extremely unlikely that these constants would happen to have just exactly the values that allow for our existence. Therefore, the universe as we observe it requires an explanation. And then that explanation may be God or the multiverse or whatever is your pet idea. Particle physicists use the same type of argument when they ask for a next larger particle collider. In that case, they claim it requires explanation why the mass of the Higgs boson happens to be what it is. This is called an argument from naturalness. I explained this in an earlier video. What's wrong with the argument? What's wrong is the claim that the values of the constants of nature that we observe are unlikely. There is no way to ever quantify this probability because we will never measure a constant of nature that has a value other than the one it does have. If you want to quantify a probability, you have to collect a sample of data. You could do that, for example, if you were throwing dice.
No. I approach this differently, and I do not want to lose this, but the part of the problem with the argument that there had to have been a creator because all the values and such are just so in order to create life. And then we say, well, what is the likelihood of all these various events and constants and such as we've observed them happening just so? And we say, well, it would be 1 over 10 to the 400 billionth, or whatever value we assign to it and come up with. And therefore, it was highly unlikely. The problem with that is pre-event probability calculations. That is what I would call pre-logic. You're using logic for an event that already happened, or probability for an event that already happened, and treating it as though it has yet to happen. So what that means is, prior to an event, if you take the lottery, for example, where I guess the Mega Millions or whatever, I think it's like 1 over 292 million. That's your odds of winning the lot, 1 over 292 million. So prior to playing the lottery, you play your numbers and it's 1 over 292 million. Very, very unlikely in that event. The winner, after the event, the winner's got the winning ticket, and you say, what is the likelihood of you winning the lottery? And it's 1. 1.0. That means 100%, but probabilities are given up to values of 1. Between 0 and 1. 0 means it cannot happen. 1 means it absolutely did or will happen. So when you're using forward-looking probability analysis for an event that already took place, you've already got misguided logic. You've already got a misguided approach to solving your problem. So she's not addressing it in that regard, but I think it is much simpler broken down that if all of the events and all of the constants and all of everything eventually brought forth mankind, and you say, well, what is the likelihood of that having happened? Well, the answer is 1. We are here. Therefore, the probability is 1.0. If you say, what are the chances of another universe forming in such a way as to bring about fill in the type of life you're imagining, that would be remarkably low, but it hasn't happened yet. And that might bespeak the arrow of time and all this stuff. Let's see what she does here.
Throw them often enough and you get an empirically supported probability distribution. But we do not have an empirically supported probability distribution for the constants of nature. And why is that? It's because they are constant. Saying that the only value we have ever observed is unlikely is a scientifically meaningless statement. We have no data and we will never have data which allow us to quantify the probability of something we cannot observe. There's nothing quantifiably unlikely, therefore there's nothing in need of explanation. If you look at the published literature on the supposed fine-tuning of the constants of nature, the mistake is always the same. They just postulate a particular probability distribution. It's this postulate that leads to their conclusion.
This
is one of the best-known logical fallacies called begging the question or circular reasoning.
Right.
You assume what you need to show, and instead of showing that a value is unlikely, they pick a specific probability distribution that makes it unlikely. They could as well pick a probability distribution that would make the observed values likely.
Oh, good
just
point.
that this doesn't give the result they want to have. And by the way, even if you could measure a probability distribution for the constants of nature, which you can't, then the idea that our particular combination of constants is necessary for life would still be wrong. There are several examples in the scientific literature for laws of nature with constants nothing like our own that, for all we can tell, allow for chemistry complex enough for life. Please check the info below the video for references. Let me be clear, though, that fine-tuning arguments are not always unscientific. The best-known example of a good fine-tuning argument is a pen balanced on its tip. If you saw that, you'd be surprised, because this is very unlikely to happen just by chance. You'd look for an explanation, a hidden mechanism.
Right.
That sounds very similar to the argument for fine-tuning the constants of nature. But the balanced pen is a very different situation. The claim that the balanced pen is unlikely is based on data. You are surprised because you don't normally encounter pens balanced
That's
on
a
their
good
tip.
point.
You have experience, meaning you have statistics. But it's completely different if you talk about changing constants that cannot be changed by any physical process. Not only do we not have experience with that, we can never get any experience. I should add, there are theories in which the constants of nature are replaced with parameters that can change with time or place. But that's a different story entirely and has nothing to do with the fine-tuning arguments. It's an interesting idea, though. Maybe I should talk about this some other time? Let me know in the comments. And for the experts, yes, I have so far specifically referred to what's known as the frequentist interpretation of probability. You can alternatively interpret the term unlikely using the Bayesian interpretation of probability. In the Bayesian sense, saying that something you observe was unlikely means you didn't expect it to happen. But with the Bayesian interpretation, the whole argument that the universe was especially made for us doesn't work. That's because, in that case, it's easy enough to find reasons for why your probability assessment was just wrong and nothing's in need of explaining. Example, did you expect a year ago that we'd spent much of 2020 in lockdown?
Right.
Probably not.
No.
You probably consider that unlikely.
Yep.
But no one would claim that you need God to explain why it seemed unlikely.
Yeah.
What does this mean for the existence of God or the multiverse? Both are assumptions that are unnecessary additions to our theories of nature. In the first case, you say, the constants of nature in our universe are what we have measured, and God made them. In the second case, you say, the constants of nature in our universe are what we have measured, and there are infinitely many other unobservable universes with other constants of nature.
Right.
Neither addition does anything to improve our theories of nature.
That is also why I say the singularity is it's a very similar line of reasoning that she just suggested. The problem with the singularity of us saying that there's a infinite dense point out of which all the matter in the universe emanated is no different than saying that there's a God that created everything, an infinitely powerful, omnipotent being outside our comprehension, outside the laws of nature, outside space and time, and created all of this. A singularity is the exact same line of reasoning, just different pieces plugged into the equation. And she's saying that regarding the multiverse too. It's like these are just theorized. We cannot observe them. They're alternate universes that have different laws and physics involved in them and whatever else they've got. So let's see where we go here.
But this does not mean God or the multiverse do not exist. It just means that evidence cannot tell us whether they do or do not exist. It means God and the multiverse are not scientific ideas. If you want to know more about fine-tuning, I have explained all this in great detail in my book, Lost in Math. In summary, was the universe made for us? We have no evidence whatsoever that this is the case.
Okay. All right. So, yeah, I mean, she and I in ways are very much in lockstep with one another. She has a far more advanced understanding of physics than I do. But the logic is in lockstep with one another, where I just say that when you're going to assess the likelihood of an event, if that's your argument, and it's an argument from probability, then you've got to say, when you're looking at something that already happened, but you're applying probability theory that is in lockstep with events that have yet to happen, it's improper. You're improperly applying the logic. So because everything happened exactly so. Like, I like that she brought up the example of, this was obviously made a few years ago, but would you have said in 2020 that COVID lockdowns would have happened? Would you have said a year prior to it that the world would be locked down, or a large part of it? And you'd say no. And that's just one thing. My example that I use is that if you were to freeze right now, you personally step outside time, world's events are frozen, and you go and you look at the shape of everybody's pillow, you look at the positioning of every cat, you see every tree's growth, you see where lightning has struck, you see where all the automobiles are on the different roads, you see where people are in the factories, every nuance, everything in everybody's refrigerator. Would you have been able to predict that all of those things would be in those places, the tens of trillions, or however molecularized you want to get, detailed you want to get, but all of those things would be exactly where they are? And no clear thinking person or rational thinker would say, yes, I could have predicted all of those things. And yet that's exactly where they are. So the logic breaks down. The way in which you're applying probability now when you say, what is the likelihood of all the world's dynamics having coalesced, been brought together at this moment in time such that every placement of everything on planet Earth is exactly where it is, the probability is 1. It happened. If you now say, what is the likelihood? I can't even predict the weather accurately now. They get kind of close on temperatures, but even that's difficult. But if you were to say, even just tomorrow, where's everything going to be on planet Earth? You can't even come close to what your neighbors are doing, let alone the entire world. So it's a different probabilistic approach. So does this argument have any bearing on whether there's a God or not? And I simply say no, just like she says. But these theories don't prove or disprove the existence of a creator. That alone is a matter of faith if people have it. But because it's not something that can be measured, it isn't something that you apply in a lab. I don't begrudge anybody who firmly believes in God. I have no problem with that whatsoever. It has no bearing on what I do with my life and how I think about things. But I do enjoy the various ideas and the challenges that they present. So anyway, I'm going to put the link to Sabine's YouTube channel down below. She has no idea I do this. I don't know if she'll ever know. She's a very busy person. So there it is. All right, folks. Hope you enjoyed that. Have a great day. Please subscribe if you haven't already. And I'll see you on the next video. Have a wonderful day.